All right, good morning, folks. It's been a little while since I've posted a long form video. My phone has been giving me some trouble, so had to get that dealt with and fixed. So I apologize about that. Um, in one of my last long form videos, I said my next video was going to be discussing the first 72 hours after discharge from a hospital. Okay, specifically for folks who spent several days, maybe a week or so, maybe a little more in the hospital. And so, the first 72 hours matter a whole lot because within the first week after discharge, that's when things often can start to unravel at home. Okay, and a large percentage of folks that discharge after being in the hospital, within that first week, they experience complications, like falling, medication mismanagement, and then if those things happen, the likelihood for readmission to the hospital goes up a little bit. Okay, so what I'm hoping to do in this video is kind of lay out some things, some reasons why the first 72 hours matter a whole lot, and some things to keep your eye on. A few videos ago, I mentioned some of the, things that would raise red flags at home, some things that you need to be mindful of and looking out for. And this video will hit on those maybe in a little more detail, and maybe give you some reasons as to why the initial week home after hospital stay can be a bit tricky to navigate, especially if you're unprepared for it as a patient or as a caregiver, or if you're a caregiver for a loved one, or a caregiver for some other, if you're a paid caregiver from some entity that has been paid to take care of a patient that has just been discharged from the hospital. So if this is your first video with me, my name's Jeremy. I am a hospital-based physical therapist, acute care physical therapist, if you will. That's another way to say I work solely in a hospital. Okay, we do therapy at the bedside for the sickest of the sick patients, or this is not great grammar, but the hurtest of the hurt, if you will. So, and the fact is, guys, I've seen patients do well in the hospital. I've seen them do well and then go home and come back within 30 days and be struggling. Okay, many times I just had a patient this past week who left inpatient rehab, went home, wasn't home for more than 24 hours, and came back to the hospital. So now, inpatient rehab isn't an acute care hospital. If you've seen my other videos, you know that. But you have an acute care hospital where that's where you go to get medically stable. Then if need be, you discharge to a inpatient rehab facility, and recover there, get rehab there, get stronger there, so that you can hopefully go home and be home safely. Well, this patient found out that they could not, even after rehab, being at home with his elderly wife wasn't going to be conducive to an effective recovery, and he came back to the hospital. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through why the first 72 hours are so risky. Okay, we're going to talk about what actually goes wrong at home, and then we're going to talk about ways that you can be prepared for it or prevent it, if you find yourself in this particular situation. So why 72 hours is such a high risk? So let's start with the data, okay? Nearly 1 in 5 Medicare patients will be readmitted within 30 days. Okay, and that's data from CMS, so the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. And here's why that matters more clinically. The risk of being at home alone or with a caregiver is front loaded. So the most difficult time you're probably going to have making the transition is going to be the first 3 days at home. Okay, because you've just spent, let's just call it 5 days in the hospital. There's 24/7 monitoring at the hospital. There are people in and out of your room making sure that you have things, hopefully, making sure, asking you if you have to go to the bathroom, and then, because hospitals are so fall averse, and within the facility, there are a lot of protocols in place and initiatives in place to facilitate better supervision of patients so that they can mobilize and go to the bathroom to some degree or the other with the appropriate supervision. And then also you have someone monitoring your medications. You have a physician coming to visit you every day. Sometimes there is remote monitoring of certain things. So, heart rate and rhythm via telemetry monitor. There's someone, there's people delivering your food to the bedside. So that's what, why things typically go, for the most part, from a mobility standpoint, things typically are safer in the hospital because of the 24/7 supervision that you have, versus going home and you have limited or maybe no supervision. So, if you live at home with a spouse, and at some point somebody's going to have to go get groceries, possibly, unless you use delivery, which is a very popular option these days. There may be other issues that would require someone to leave the home and then leave the patient that just discharged there for an hour or 2 hours or something like that. Okay, so that's why the first 72 hours is such a high risk, because you go from a lot of supervision and monitoring to very limited to almost none, unless you have set things up to be conducive for that. Okay, so what actually goes wrong at home? Okay, what things start to become an issue that maybe weren't an issue in the hospital? And this is where that red flag video comes in a little bit. So check that out if you haven't checked it out. So we're going to cover maybe some similar things, and maybe with just a few more caveats with this video. So fatigue hits harder at home. Okay, fatigue becomes more pronounced at home. Okay, so in the hospital, patients do 1 to 2 solid mobility sessions per day, possibly with the rehab staff. So we're in the room. Somebody like myself would be in the room probably 10 to 20 minutes, maybe a little longer if needed. And we ideally do that twice a day, and that doesn't happen all the time in the hospital for all kinds of reasons. One is the amount of volume that we have to see in the hospital, and number two is, patients are often going to and from different tests or procedures or what have you, and we may not be able to get to them 2 times a day. So at home, though, you're going to be required to get up, down, move around, go to the kitchen, go to the bathroom multiple times a day, change your clothes, take a shower or a bath, and go to transition to and from different rooms. You may want to go to visit someone at their, visit a family member at their home or something like that. And so you go from, like I said earlier, lots of supervision to almost none, and then your mobility demands increase at home. And so if you haven't been moving around very much, your endurance may become depleted as a result, just by virtue of being in the hospital. And the way I tell patients this and try to explain it to them is, have you ever had a bad stomach flu or stomach virus or just a bad case of the flu? For the best of us, if we get hit pretty hard by something like that, it may take us 2, 3, 4 days to recover after the virus has kind of ran its course. And that is compounded when you find yourself in the hospital because of a severe infection or a surgery or a trauma or some sort of other disease that needs to be dealt with. Okay, so when your endurance drops, or when your mobility demand increases and you do not have the endurance capacity to meet that demand, now your balance starts to fail. Your ability to be stable doing certain things because of that balance, the impaired balance starts to fail, and your fall risk goes way up. Okay, so that's one reason why what goes wrong at home from going from the hospital to home is that fatigue hits a lot harder at home. Okay, number two, the environment is much different, and this should be kind of a no-brainer a little bit, but in hospitals, things are set up to be handicap accessible, very flat, very open, no sharp edges, no rugs, and so on and so forth. And so you have that environment versus when you get home, unless there has been some sort of foresight in seeing that things need to be handicap accessible, you may have narrow spaces, narrow walkways, um, uh, rugs in the way or on the floor, narrow door frames, and so also low toilets, right? Low toilets is another one. Low chairs is another one. And then, there may be any number of obstacles in the home environment. I've said for the longest time for patients, if I could somehow develop some sort of technology that would allow me to map your home environment onto your hospital room, that we could solve a lot of problems, potential problems. We could foresee potential problems before you discharge home. But and maybe in the world of AI that will become a thing at some point. I don't know. That's maybe a business idea for me. Who knows? That's down the road. Um, so that same patient was able to move around well in the hospital environment because everything's flat, open, and very safe for the most part, versus going into home possibly with impaired endurance, impaired strength, impaired functional capacity to navigate a trickier environment in their own home environment. Okay. Number 3, and that's the caregiver gap. Okay. Caregiver gap. Simply what that means is there sometimes can be a knowledge gap in what the hospital staff understands how to do and knows how to do. So, for instance, my job is to mobilize patients that can't mobilize very well. I do it every day under all kinds of conditions for all kinds of patients. Sometimes they can't use an arm. Sometimes they can't use either arm. Sometimes they can't use a leg. Sometimes they have a significant difficulty performing certain mobility tasks. And I've seen a wide range of patients like that. So my ability to assist them is going to be much different than someone who has never done anything like that before. And so staff members in the hospital oftentimes know how to assess patients or assist them more effectively versus at home. Sometimes families are kind of out of the frying pan into the fire, so to speak. They get home and they realize that their loved one or spouse or daughter or whoever is going to require significant assistance, and they may not have the necessary training or familiarity with how to assist those patients effectively like we do in the hospital. And that's one reason why I'm trying to make this channel, is to help caregivers, patients and caregivers understand and be able to prepare for things that are coming once you discharge home. Okay. And so that mismatch of caregiver familiarity with being able to help patients that have mobility issues, that's a significant driver of early complications. Okay. Number 4, and that's cognitive overload. And this is the way I say this in the hospital. The home environment makes demands of you that you're not aware of until you spend time outside of the home and have help, and then you go back into the home. Okay. So, when you're in the hospital, maybe you were found out to, need some sort of new medication because of an issue that had developed. Okay. So now you're going home with a new medication. All right. You may still be hurting. Being in the hospital oftentimes disrupts sleep patterns. And so that takes time to kind of, adjust back to what it means and what it requires of someone to be at home. And so many of those things aren't distinctly physical, but they will play into the physicality of a patient or the physical function of a patient if they aren't dealt with effectively. So if you don't take your medications right, certainly that can be a complication. If you're still hurting, it's very easy to want to just sit, be sedentary at home, because at the hospital you got people like me coming to make you move and or make you to some degree and strongly encourage you to move, or a patient to move. And so if there's any type of confusion left over from being in the hospital. So there are some issues and some disease processes that cause confusion at to a patient. Urinary tract infection is one of them. If that confusion isn't cleared up by the time the patient's ready to go home, they may be mobilizing very well at the hospital. Maybe their confusion is mild, but when you get home, things that were mild at the hospital seem to become more exacerbated in the home environment. Okay, so because of those, those four things that can go wrong, what are the consequences of those things going wrong? Okay, what are the consequences? Research consistently shows that falls, I mean, guys, I say this every day. I've said it a bunch on this channel. Falls are one of the leading causes of readmissions after discharge. That makes sense. That shouldn't be that shouldn't catch many of you by surprise at this point. Functional decline leads to falls, and those falls often cause a readmission to the hospital. Okay, I saw 2 last week. 2 people went home, fell, had to come back to the hospital, and there's all kinds of reasons for that. Some can be controlled and dealt with, some cannot. And so more importantly, many readmissions are considered preventable with better transition planning or better discharge planning. Now, the elephant in the room when it comes to discharge planning a lot of times is the patient open to going anywhere else but home? And sometimes, lots of times they are, but lots of times they aren't. And I shared a story in a few videos ago about a gentleman who was not willing to go home. He couldn't even stand up by himself. Okay, he lived with an elderly spouse that was not equipped physically to be able to help him, and he basically told me it was very explicitly. He said, "If I go home and I fall and I hurt myself or worse, that's my prerogative and my right. I'm going home." I didn't agree with him, obviously. His family didn't agree with him, and but that is his right as a patient, especially if he's in his right mind. So again, guys, the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services has highlighted the fact that many falls and readmissions in the hospital are preventable with better discharge or transition planning. Okay, and again, I'm hoping to help facilitate some of that by helping families know the questions to ask, know what to be aware of, so that they can either, if you're a patient, help yourself, advocate for yourself, or if you're a caregiver of someone who's been in the hospital recently, to be able to advocate and help them as well. So what do you do? What's the action plan if you start noticing some of these things go on within the first 72 hours at home? So number one, day one. This is what you need to do day one, okay? Day one, supervise all mobility the first 24 hours at home, okay? Limit the unnecessary movements and activities at home within that first day. So you're kind of warming up to the home environment. You can think about it like that. Hey, we're going to try to recreate the hospital environment to a degree, to the degree that we can in the home environment the first day, and slowly see, can this patient meet the demands of the home environment? Days 2 and 3. Watch out for fatigue. Okay, let them try to do a few more activities, and don't limit. Identify the hardest task for them at home. Do they have a lot of trouble in the bathroom? Do they have a lot of trouble in the kitchen? Do they have stairs they must go up or down? Is that difficult? So identify those and adjust the environment if necessary. Okay, so do we need to make changes in the bathroom? Do we need to remove rugs in the bathroom? Do we need to move things? Do we need to have a shower chair or a tub bench? Do we need to get an elevated toilet seat? Do we need to put a grab bar? Those types of things. If you end up leaving the hospital and having a home health physical therapy come visit at home over within that 24 to 48 hour period after you get home, they can be a good resource to assess the home environment as well and try to make plans to address whatever changes or make whatever changes are necessary. Okay, so day one priorities are supervise all mobility, limit unnecessary movement, and focus on safe transfers. Okay, safety getting out of the bed, safety standing up. That's kind of day one. Okay, warming up to the home environment. Day 2 and 3, you want to allow a little more freedom, especially if they performed well in day one. If they didn't perform well and you start noticing some red flags, that's the time to let a physician know. You don't want some accident to happen before you let the primary care doctor know that, hey, we're having some issues. Okay. Day 2 and 3, watch for fatigue patterns. Are there certain things that fatigue them more? Identify the hardest tasks and mobility needs at home. Oftentimes the bathroom, maybe the kitchen, maybe other rooms of the home. Just be on the lookout for that. And then also adjust the environment if needed. And then what you always watch for, okay? Always watch for, excuse me, is, are they needing increased help? That's a red flag that we mentioned a few videos ago, okay? Are their movements slowing down? Are they becoming less efficient? Again, a red flag, all right? Have you noticed a near fall? Do they want to, if they're using a walker, do they have a near fall with the walker? If they aren't using a walker, are they choosing to reach out and try to touch furniture or lean or kind of let their hand ride along the wall to give them a sense of stability? If they're doing that and they weren't before they were in the hospital and they've chosen to do that now, that means that their body is saying, we don't feel stable to mobilize or walk without touching something. We need another input, and we need to put our hand on something so that our brain can say, okay, we feel safe, moving down the hallway, say. And then also, somewhat more significantly, are they refusing to move? Are they refusing to move? A lot of times when folks refuse to move, that it may seem like they're being stubborn, but what it is their brain is telling them, we don't feel safe mobilizing, so we're not going to. And so they ask for, hey, can you bring me this? Hey, can you come help me do this? Hey, can you bring me the remote control? And the remote control is literally 5 feet over there. And before the hospital stay, they were able to do that fine. Okay, so increased help needed, slower movements, near falls, or needing a lot of feeling like they want to touch things in order to walk, and then also refusal to move. Those are all early warning signs of a potential problem that needs to be addressed. Okay, so what's the biggest mistake families make? The biggest mistake families make is they assume that being able to perform in a hospital is going to translate to being able to perform safely at home. And that's just not the case. Performance in a controlled environment does not always translate into real life home environment. Okay? And so, again, the goal is not to avoid going home. And this is what we tell patients all the time at the hospital. We want all of our patients to go back to their home or wherever they were prior to coming to the hospital. We don't necessarily want to send people to, intermediate care facilities like a skilled nursing facility or an inpatient rehab facility if they don't need it. However, the goal, if needed, if that patient can't function safely at home, that's where those other facilities come into play. But the goal is not to just simply to avoid going home. The goal is to be prepared for what happens in the home environment after you get there. Okay, so that wraps us up for this video. It's short, sweet, hopefully punchy and to the point. If you have any questions or comments, man, leave me a comment and indicate if you've had any issues with either yourself or a family member or a loved one that you were taking care of, and you noticed some of these issues that we mentioned, that I mentioned in this video. Comment 72 hours. If you are in that 72-hour window and you have questions or concerns, you can leave those also in the comments. And until next time, guys, remember, like I always say, you can't go wrong getting strong. All right, you guys be safe, and we'll see you on the next video.